Right now, at some point today, you will pick up your phone for no reason. Not because a notification came in, not because you needed to check something, just because a moment of stillness arrived and your brain refused to sit inside it. You did it yesterday, you'll do it tomorrow. And the strange part is, you probably didn't even notice. For 300,000 years, your ancestors didn't have phones. They didn't have books, television, or music they could play on demand. They sat in silence for hours. They stared at fire. They waited for animals that might not come. And not a single piece of evidence suggests they were miserable because of it. So what happened to us? Why can modern humans barely sit alone in a quiet room for 4 minutes without reaching for something? And why did ancient humans not only tolerate stillness, they may have needed it? The answer starts with a problem that didn't exist for most of human history. Boredom, as we experience it today, is surprisingly new. The word itself didn't appear in the English language until 1852. Before that, the closest concept was a medieval Latin term, acedia. But acedia wasn't what we call boredom. It was something darker, a spiritual torpor, a listlessness of the soul. Monks in the desert described it as a demon that arrived in the middle of the day and made life feel hollow and pointless. It wasn't about having nothing to do. It was about feeling like nothing was worth doing. That distinction matters more than it sounds, because for ancient humans, genuine idleness almost never existed. A day with nothing to do wasn't a relief, it was a threat. If you weren't hunting, gathering, building shelter, tending fire, tracking weather, or watching for predators, you were likely about to die. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups have found that subsistence living requires somewhere between 4 and 6 hours of active work per day. Not the 8 to 10 hours of a modern workday, 4 to 6. But the remaining hours weren't empty. They were filled with something our brains are extraordinarily well designed to do, something we've nearly eliminated from modern life: unstructured social time. In a 2010 study published in Science, psychologists Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert gave smartphones to 2,250 adults and tracked their thoughts throughout the day using random notifications. Not what they were doing, what their minds were doing. The results were stark. In 47% of waking hours, people's minds were not on what they were doing. They were wandering, thinking about something other than the present moment. And almost without exception, mind-wandering made them less happy than being present. Killingsworth and Gilbert concluded that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. But here's what that study didn't ask. What were ancient humans' minds wandering to? Because the mind doesn't wander randomly. It wanders toward what it's been trained to find interesting. And for most of human history, what the mind found interesting was other people, their dramas, their problems, their stories. Psychologist Robin Dunbar at Oxford has spent decades studying the social behavior of primates and humans. His research suggests that somewhere between 60 and 65% of all human conversation throughout history has been about social information. Who did what? Who is trustworthy? Who is sleeping with whom? What we casually call gossip, Dunbar argues, is the human equivalent of primate grooming. It's how we maintain social bonds across groups too large to touch. Ancient humans didn't get bored in stillness because stillness was never truly empty. It was full of the most interesting content their brains had access to: other humans, the social world around them. The campfire wasn't entertainment in the modern sense, it was the entire information network. But something deeper was happening too. In 2019, neuroscientist Marcus Raichle at Washington University confirmed what researchers had been noticing for years. The brain has a default mode network, a system of regions that activates not when you're focused on a task, but when you're doing nothing in particular. For a long time, scientists assumed this network was idle, background noise. It isn't. The default mode network is where your brain processes social information, simulates future scenarios, consolidates memories, and works through unresolved problems. It's where creativity happens, where insight arrives, and it only runs properly when you're not focused on something external. Ancient humans, with their hours of unstructured time around fires, in transit between camps, waiting at water sources, They were running this network constantly. Not because they chose to, because there was nothing else to do. Modern humans have nearly shut it off. The average adult now spends over 7 hours per day looking at screens. Every gap, every elevator ride, every waiting room, every 30 seconds between tasks is filled with input. Notifications, videos, scrolling feeds designed by engineers to be maximally compelling. Your default mode network never gets a clean run. And here is what that costs you. In 2014, psychologist Sandy Mann at the University of Central Lancashire ran a series of experiments on boredom and creativity. In one version, participants spent time on a boring task, copying numbers from a phone book, before being asked to complete a creative challenge. A second group skipped the boring task entirely. The bored group performed significantly better. Mann's conclusion was direct. Boredom is a signal. It's your brain telling you that the current environment isn't stimulating enough and pushing you toward something more meaningful. Boredom is the itch that makes you scratch toward creativity, toward daydreaming, toward problem solving. It isn't an error, it's a function. But we've built a world that treats it like an error. Every moment of potential boredom is immediately patched with content, and in doing so, we've broken the signal. This is why modern boredom feels so different from anything ancient humans experienced. When we're bored today, we don't sit with it. We immediately reach for relief. But the relief doesn't work, because the platforms delivering it are engineered to satisfy just enough to keep you scrolling, never enough to feel complete. You end up in a loop your ancestors never encountered. Too stimulated to be present, too distracted to be satisfied. The signal keeps firing, but nothing answers it. In 2014, a series of studies at the University of Virginia asked participants to sit alone in a room with nothing, no phone, no book, no distractions, for just 6 to 15 minutes. They could do nothing, or they could press a button that would give them a mild electric shock. 67% of men chose the shock. They chose pain over stillness. For 300,000 years, your ancestors sat in the dark and thought. They processed the day. They daydreamed about people they loved and plans they were making. They let their minds run without interruption. That process built the brain you're using right now. The hippocampus was consolidating memories. The prefrontal cortex was working through social problems. The default mode network was doing the slow, invisible work that conscious thought can't do. They weren't bored, they were processing. And we've mistaken processing for emptiness. Here's the part that stays with you. Ancient humans didn't need to be entertained because the world they lived in was genuinely difficult. Every problem was real, immediate, and personal. Your mind had no shortage of material to chew on because survival gave it an endless supply. Modern life removed most of those problems, and then, without meaning to, removed the mental space we used to sit with them. We didn't just build a world with fewer threats. We built a world where the brain is never, for a single moment, allowed to be alone with itself. And the result is a species that can access every piece of information ever recorded and still can't sit quietly for 4 minutes. Your ancestors stared at fire for hours and came away sharper, calmer, more connected to the people around them. You scroll for hours and come away feeling like something is missing. The fire is still inside you, the capacity for stillness, for processing, for the kind of presence that built human civilization. It's still there. You just have to stop filling the silence long enough to find it.